Have you ever watched two trucks pull out of the same yard, heading the same direction, carrying the same weight, and found yourself wondering which one is actually better? Not better in the way a brochure tells you something is better, with carefully selected numbers and flattering photography, but better in the way that actually matters to the person sitting behind the wheel at 2 a.m. on a mountain grade with a full load and a long way still to go. Because that question, the real world rubber meets road, money on the line version of that question, is exactly what the battle between Scania and Volvo at the very top of European truck performance has been asking and answering for the better part of a decade. And the specific chapter of that story we are getting into today involves two trucks, two engines, and a horsepower figure that would have seemed almost reckless. In a highway truck not very long ago, 780 horsepower in a truck on a public road, pulling a legal European trailer combination. The kind of number that makes diesel enthusiasts stop scrolling and read the whole article, and that makes fleet accountants reach for their calculators with equal parts excitement and anxiety. Because when Scania and Volvo both arrived at the 780 horsepower benchmark from different directions, through different engineering philosophies, with different engine architectures, and different ideas about what that power should feel like and how it should be delivered, the comparison that followed was not just a performance story. It was a story about two Swedish companies, separated by about 300 kilometers of Swedish highway, that have been competing so intensely and so productively for so long that they have collectively pushed the entire global heavy truck industry to places it might not have reached on its own timeline. So today we are getting into all of it: the engines, the engineering, the real-world performance differences, what the drivers who have run both trucks actually say, and what this battle at the top of the horsepower chart means for where heavy trucks are going next. Stick around, because this is the kind of competition that makes the whole industry better, and understanding it makes you understand trucks at a completely different level. Hey everyone, Travis Walker here, Titan Haulers, pulling over at a rest stop just outside of Cheyenne, Wyoming. I have got a load of industrial equipment heading west, and I'm taking a few minutes, because tonight's topic is one I have been wanting to do for a long time: Scania versus Volvo at the very top of their game. Now, I want to be upfront with you about something. I'm an American driver. My daily is a Peterbilt 389. I grew up on American iron. I have built my career on American iron, and I make no apology for any of that. But I also drove a Scania 770s last year for a review on this channel, and I have had seat time in a Volvo FH16 through a fleet contact in Canada who runs European spec equipment. And I will tell you what I told you: then good engineering is good engineering regardless of what flag it flies. These two trucks at 780 horsepower are doing things that deserve serious attention from anyone who cares about what a diesel truck can be. So let us get into it properly. Before we talk about 780 horsepower, we need to spend a moment on the context that produced it. Because the Scania versus Volvo rivalry is not just a marketing competition between two companies that happen to make similar products. It is one of the most consequential engineering rivalries in the history of commercial vehicles. And the trucks we are talking about today are the latest expression of something that has been building for over 100 years. Scania was founded in 1911 in Södertälje. Volvo started building trucks in 1928, headquartered in Gothenburg. Two Swedish companies, both deeply embedded in the engineering culture of a country that punches significantly above its weight in industrial technology, both serving the same European market, both fully aware of exactly what the other is doing at all times. The proximity matters. When Scania develops a new engine, Volvo knows about it faster than any competitor in Germany, France, or the Netherlands would. When Volvo introduces a new cab design or a new transmission, Scania's engineering teams are benchmarking it within weeks. The competition is intimate in a way that competition between companies separated by oceans or continents simply cannot be. An intimate competition, competition where you can see exactly what the other side is doing and be seen doing exactly what you're doing, tends to produce faster progress than competition at a distance. The result of a century of that dynamic is two truck manufacturers that are, by most measures, the two most technically accomplished heavy truck builders in the world. Not the largest, not the most profitable in every market, but the ones that have pushed the hardest at the boundaries of what a diesel truck can do, and that have pushed each other to push harder than either would have alone. The 780 horsepower battle is the current peak of that century-long process. And to understand it properly, you have to understand the two very different engineering philosophies that produced it. Scania's path to 780 horsepower runs through one of the most iconic engine architectures in the history of commercial vehicles, the Scania V8, an engine that has been in continuous development since 1969, that has grown from its original output through a sequence of power increases that reads like a timeline of what diesel technology thought was possible at each point in its history, and that currently produces 770 horsepower in its most powerful production form, with the 780 figure achieved through specific market configurations and software tuning. The architecture is a 16-liter V8, 8 cylinders arranged in two banks of four, a configuration that is extraordinarily unusual in a highway truck engine in an era where inline-six engines dominate the market. Scania chose the V8 not for its unusualness, but for its engineering characteristics. A V8 of this displacement is inherently well-balanced, producing a firing interval that generates a smooth power delivery with minimal vibration. It is physically more compact for its displacement than an inline configuration of the same size would be, which matters for cab-over packaging. And it produces a deep, layered, multi-cylinder exhaust note that is unlike any inline engine at any power level. That has become one of the most recognized and most valued sounds in European trucking. That sound is not a marketing accident. It is the acoustic signature of a specific engine architecture. And Scania has leaned into it with a self-awareness that is almost unusual for a commercial vehicle manufacturer. The V8 badge on the grille of a Scania is a status symbol in European trucking in the way that very few purely functional components become status symbols. Drivers post about getting their first V8 truck the way people post about significant life achievements. And that emotional connection built on decades of the engine earning its reputation through real-world performance is one of Scania's most durable competitive assets. The 770 horsepower current production specification and the 780 figure in tuned configurations is produced from those 16 liters through a combination of twin turbocharging with advanced charge air management, high-pressure common rail injection with multiple injection events per combustion cycle, and an engine management system that has been refined through years of real-world operational data from Scania's enormous European customer base. The torque figure that accompanies that power output is the number that working drivers pay most attention to. The Scania V8 at its top specification produces 3,700 Newton meters of torque. To put that in terms that American audiences find intuitive, that is approximately 2,729 pound-feet. From a highway truck engine, the pulling force that number represents, available across a broad RPM range through careful engine mapping, is what allows a loaded Scania to maintain composure on alpine grades that would have lesser trucks hunting desperately through their gear ratios. Now here's where the story gets interesting in the way that genuine engineering competition always does. Because Volvo looked at the same performance target, the same market, the same drivers making the same demands, and arrived at a fundamentally different answer. Volvo's FH16, the truck that carries their flag at the top of the European performance market, uses a 16-liter inline-six engine rather than a V8. The D16 engine, in its current 780 horsepower specification, is one of the most powerful inline-six truck engines ever built for highway application, and it makes a compelling argument for why the inline-six configuration, done right at this scale, can challenge a V8 for everything that matters in actual operation. The engineering case for the inline-six at this power level is straightforward in principle, even if it is complex in execution. An inline-six is naturally balanced in a way that produces almost no primary or secondary vibration forces, which means it runs smoothly without the balancing shafts or counterweights that other configurations require. It is simpler to manufacture than a V8, with one cylinder head rather than two, one valve train rather than two, and a more accessible layout for maintenance. And in commercial vehicle applications, simplicity and accessibility translate directly into lower maintenance costs and shorter service times, both of which matter enormously to fleet operators managing large numbers of vehicles across long service intervals. Volvo's execution of that inline-six concept at 780 horsepower required solving engineering problems that are genuinely difficult. Getting 780 horsepower from 6 cylinders rather than 8 means each cylinder is working harder, which creates thermal and mechanical stress challenges that 8-cylinder architectures distribute more easily. Volvo's answer involved an advanced turbocharging system, sophisticated thermal management, and an engine block and head design that handles the thermal loads of high-output operation within the packaging constraints of a cab-over truck. The result is an engine that produces its 780 horsepower figure with a torque output of 3,550 newton meters, slightly below the Scania's 3,700, but delivered with a character that Volvo drivers consistently describe as linear, predictable, and deeply confidence-inspiring under sustained heavy loads. Where the Scania V8 has a certain theatrical quality to its power delivery, a drama in the sound, and the surge that drivers either love absolutely or find slightly overwhelming, the Volvo D16 has a composed, almost understated quality that experienced operators find genuinely reassuring in demanding conditions. An engine number tells you what a truck can theoretically do. The chassis and cab around it determine what the truck actually feels like to operate. And this is where the Scania and Volvo philosophies diverge in ways that go beyond the engine room. Scania's approach to the chassis at the top of the range is built around their modular system, which we have discussed on this channel before in the context of European trucks generally. The frame, the axle configurations, the suspension options, and the cab choices all work within a standardized architecture that allows an enormous number of combinations, while maintaining parts compatibility and serviceability across the range. The top-spec Scania for this power level typically uses the Highline or Topline cab, both of which offer a level of interior quality and driver environment that is consistently rated among the best in the European market. The driving position in the Scania at this level is something that Travis noted specifically during his time in the 770s. The visibility from a cab-over truck is fundamentally different from a long-nose American conventional. And for someone accustomed to looking over the hood of a Peterbilt, the Scania's position directly above the front axle takes adjustment. But once that adjustment is made, the visibility advantage is real and significant. You're sitting at the very front of the vehicle with a clear view of everything around you in a way that the American long-nose configuration, with its extended hood and high seating position, does not replicate. Volvo's FH cab, and specifically the FH16 variant, fitted with the XL or XXL sleeping configuration for long-haul applications, has a reputation for interior quality that is arguably the benchmark of the entire European market. The Globetrotter cab that Volvo offers at the top of the range provides standing room inside the sleeping area, a level of living space that turns the truck from a vehicle you sleep in into a space you actually live in during extended operations. The control layout, the quality of the materials, the noise insulation at highway speed, these are areas where Volvo has invested consistently and where the investment shows. Both trucks use AMT transmissions at this power level. Scania's OptiCruise and Volvo's iShift are both mature, highly developed automated systems that have been refined through millions of kilometers of real-world operation. The integration between the engine management and the transmission control in both trucks is sophisticated enough that gear selection feels entirely natural, and the system's decisions are almost always the ones an experienced driver would have made manually. Here is where we get away from specifications and into the data that fleet operators actually base purchasing decisions on. Because at 780 horsepower, both trucks are operating in a territory where the theoretical performance numbers are impressive, but the real-world operational numbers are what determine whether the investment makes sense. Fuel economy is the number that carries the most weight in any serious fleet evaluation, and at this power level, the comparison between the Scania and Volvo is closer than the engine architecture difference might suggest. Independent fleet tests conducted by European transport publications and logistics companies have consistently shown the two trucks within 3 to 5% of each other in fuel consumption on comparable routes with comparable loads. The Volvo inline-six's theoretical efficiency advantage is partially offset by the Scania V8's broader torque curve, which allows it to pull through situations where the Volvo might need a downshift that costs momentum and therefore fuel. The specific application matters enormously in this comparison. On flat terrain at constant highway speeds, the Volvo's inline-six tends to perform very slightly more efficiently. On hilly and mountainous terrain with frequent gradient changes, the Scania's torque characteristics and the OptiCruise system's mountain mode logic tend to close or eliminate that gap. Operators running specific route profiles that involve sustained high-speed highway work tend to favor the Volvo marginally on fuel. Operators running mixed terrain, including significant gradient work, tend to find the Scania's fuel numbers more competitive than the spec sheet comparison would predict. Reliability data from large European fleets running both trucks shows a picture that is genuinely close. Both trucks have strong reliability records at this power level, which was not always the case when extreme output truck engines were first introduced. The engineering maturity of both the Scania V8 and the Volvo D16 at their current specifications reflects decades of development, and the failure rates of both have reached a level that fleet operators find acceptable in the context of the performance they are getting. The total cost of ownership calculation, which includes purchase price, fuel, maintenance, tires, and residual value, tends to favor whichever truck is better matched to the specific operation. Scania's modular parts system and dense European service network give it an advantage in maintenance cost predictability. Volvo's dealer network is equally dense and its parts pricing is competitive. Neither truck has a decisive advantage in total cost of ownership terms, which means the decision comes down to the operational specifics and more often than fleet managers like to admit, the preferences of the drivers who have to live in these trucks. Here's the part of the comparison that the spec sheets cannot capture and that Travis pays particular attention to when evaluating any truck. What do the people who actually operate these vehicles day after day in real conditions with real loads and real schedules say about the experience? The Scania V8 has a driver loyalty that is remarkable by any commercial vehicle standard. Drivers who run V8-equipped Scanias talk about the truck with a genuine affection that goes beyond rational preference. The sound is a significant part of this. The V8's exhaust note at full load on a grade is something that experienced drivers describe in terms that sound more like music criticism than truck evaluation. It has a depth, a layering, a character that the inline-six simply does not replicate, and for drivers who spend their working lives inside the sound of their engine, that character matters in ways that are hard to quantify but real. The torque delivery of the V8 also generates consistent positive comment from drivers running demanding terrain. The way the engine responds to a full load grade, the sense of reserve and capability that 3,700 Newton meters provides, gives drivers a confidence that influences how they manage the truck and how they feel at the end of a long shift. A truck that always feels like it has more in reserve is a less stressful truck to operate than one that feels like it is working at the edge of its capability. Volvo FH16 drivers tend to describe their experience in different terms but with equal conviction. The composure of the inline-six at sustained high output, the smoothness of the power delivery, the quality of the cab environment, and the sophistication of the I-Shift's integration with the engine under load are the recurring themes. Volvo drivers often describe the FH16 as a truck that makes them feel more in control. Not because the Scania is out of control, but because the Volvo's character is so linear and so predictable that managing it becomes almost effortless after a period of familiarity. Travis's honest assessment after his time in both configurations is that the preference between them is genuinely personal in a way that makes picking a winner somewhat meaningless. They are different experiences of the same performance envelope, like two instruments that can play the same notes but sound fundamentally different doing it. A driver who values character, drama, and the sense of operating something genuinely special will gravitate to the Scania V8. A driver who values composure, refinement, and a sense of effortless capability will gravitate to the Volvo FH16. Both preferences are legitimate. Both trucks will do the job extraordinarily well. Here's the bigger story that the Scania versus Volvo competition at 780 horsepower tells about the heavy truck industry as a whole, because the impact of this rivalry extends well beyond the two companies involved, and the European market they primarily compete in. The willingness of both Scania and Volvo to develop and productionize 780 horsepower highway truck engines demonstrated that output levels previously considered impractical for European regulatory and operational contexts were in fact achievable without sacrificing reliability, fuel economy competitiveness, or emissions compliance. That demonstration raised the ceiling of what the entire industry considered possible. German manufacturers, specifically Mercedes-Benz Trucks and MAN, both part of the same Traton group as Scania, responded to the Scania-Volvo performance escalation by accelerating their own high-output engine development programs. The competitive pressure from the Swedish manufacturers pushed the German engineering traditions to places they might have reached eventually on their own, but reached faster because the benchmark was being set publicly and visibly by companies in the same market. The emissions technology required to achieve 780 horsepower within Euro 6 compliance constraints also pushed the development of after-treatment and combustion management technology in ways that benefited the entire engine output spectrum. The solutions developed for the extreme demands of top-end performance engines filtered down through the range, improving the efficiency and emissions performance of standard output engines that the vast majority of operators actually purchase. And the driver attention generated by the 780 horsepower figure, the enthusiasm, the YouTube videos, the truck show conversations, the social media content, kept the premium end of the European truck market commercially viable in a way that justified continued investment. A market that generates genuine enthusiasm sustains the investment required to keep pushing the technology forward. And the Scania versus Volvo battle at the top of the horsepower chart has been generating that enthusiasm consistently for years. The natural question after understanding where these two trucks are today is where the competition goes from here. And the honest answer is that the direction is not simply more horsepower, because the regulatory environment and the industry's emissions commitments create a ceiling that the current generation of diesel engines is approaching. Both Scania and Volvo are investing heavily in alternative powertrain development. Electric trucks for regional and urban applications, hydrogen combustion engines for long-haul applications where battery energy density remains a limiting factor, and hybrid configurations that combine electric assistance with downsized diesel engines for specific duty cycles. The engineering talent and resources that have been developing diesel performance at the extreme end of the market are now being redirected toward these alternative technologies, and the competitive dynamic between the two companies is following them there. Scania has been public about its development of hydrogen combustion engines, arguing that the combustion expertise developed over a century of diesel engine development translates more directly to hydrogen combustion than to fuel cell technology, and that hydrogen combustion can deliver the driving character and performance that professional drivers value in a way that electric drivetrains currently do not replicate. The V8 heritage and the driver loyalty built around it are assets that Scania is explicitly trying to carry forward into the hydrogen era. Volvo has invested heavily in battery electric trucks for shorter range applications and is developing fuel cell technology for longer range work. Their argument is that the total efficiency of the electrical energy pathway from generation through storage to traction ultimately delivers better outcomes than combustion of any fuel, and that the composure and linearity of electric power delivery aligns well with the driving character that FH drivers already value. Whether the next generation of this competition plays out around hydrogen combustion engines or fuel cells or some combination of both, the dynamic will be the same. Two companies 300 kilometers apart watching each other closely, competing intensely, and collectively pushing the technology of commercial vehicle propulsion further than either would go alone. So what does the Scania versus Volvo 780 horsepower battle actually mean beyond the impressive numbers and the spectacular driving experiences it produces? It means that competition at the highest level, competition between genuinely matched rivals who respect each other's capability while refusing to accept second place, produces outcomes that benefit everyone downstream. The drivers who will never sit in a 780 horsepower truck benefit from the technology that was developed at that extreme and filtered down through the range. The fleets running standard output engines benefit from the emissions technology, the transmission sophistication, and the cab quality standards that the premium competition established and normalized. Travis Walker will tell you that the American truck industry, the industry he grew up in and has built his career around, is not immune to this lesson. The competition between Peterbilt, Kenworth, and Freightliner has produced its own innovations and its own engineering advances, but the specific dynamic of two companies in the same small country, competing in the same market with the same customers at the absolute top of the performance envelope, produces a kind of concentrated intensity that is genuinely unusual and genuinely productive. The 780 horsepower figure that both Scania and Volvo arrived at is not a coincidence. It is the current answer to a question that both companies have been asking each other for a century. How good can a truck be? And the fact that they keep asking it, keep answering it, and keep raising the bar on what the answer looks like is why European trucks at the top of the market are as extraordinary as they are. The next answer is coming from Södertälje and from Gothenburg, and wherever they land, it will be worth paying attention to. Which one would you choose? The Scania V8 or the Volvo FH16? And why? Drop it in the comments below. We genuinely want to know. Thanks for watching Titan Haulers, and remember to subscribe for much more.